It's initializing. Hey, hi everyone. Welcome. We're just going to wait maybe 1 or 2 minutes for everyone to join, and then we will get started. All right, I will start by doing an acknowledgement of country, and then I will also introduce WORK180. So I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which this event is taking place and pay our respects to Indigenous elders of the past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I also recognize those whose ongoing efforts to protect and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures will leave a lasting legacy for future elders and leaders. So if you feel comfortable, we would love to hear the land in which that you are calling from in the chat box, and your name if you're comfortable as well. And while you're doing that, I will introduce WORK180. So welcome to our latest community event. So if you're unfamiliar with WORK180, we are a jobs board with a difference. We pre-screen employers on paid parental leave, pay equity, flexible working arrangements, and much more. This information is not publicly listed anywhere else, and it is an essential tool in your job search when assessing employers. So the space that you're in right now is our free online community space. So this is where we offer free career coaching sessions, and it's also a safe space where you can ask questions and offer your advice to other women or just network with other like-minded women. As I said, the space is totally free, so please make sure that you share with your coworkers, your friends, your family. And today we're going to hear from Hannah. So Hannah is one of our career coaches. She hangs out in the forum quite a bit, so you might have already seen her answering some questions and providing some really, really incredible advice. So we're really, really excited to have her. Feel free to use the chat box, ask some questions, and we'll get to them at the end. It's going to be recorded, and we will send out a follow-up email. And okay, so I'm going to put myself on mute and hand it over to Hannah.
Thanks very much for the intro, Jenna, and thanks very much to everyone who is joining for today's webinar. My name is Hannah Hamad. I'm founder and director of Small Circle and a mum of two, originally from London, but now based in Melbourne. So Small Circle, my business, helps professional women create careers they love, secure amazing roles, change direction, and negotiate better deals through coaching, strategy, and standout CVs. This is the second webinar that I've delivered in conjunction with WORK180. Really enjoyed the last one. And hopefully today you guys will enjoy and get some value from the content that I'm sharing as much as I know that you did from the one that I did a couple of months ago. So today we're talking a little bit about promotions, how to score that next promotion with confidence. I think just touching upon the sort of idea of comfort zone to start. So everyone has a really a different tolerance level for how far and how quickly they're going to push out of their comfort zone. And comfort zone is something I'm going to be talking a little bit about today. The other sort of two things that I think will be key drivers in how likely people are to get promotions, to even know what that sort of ideal next step look like, are going to be clarity. What are my options and where exactly do I want to go within my career? And confidence. So how confident do I feel, in terms of being able to go after whatever that ideal next move is. But I am going to be talking quite a bit about the comfort zone today, because it is something I think a lot of people fall into a trap of. Like, you find your comfort zone, you find your sort of safe space, and it can be a little bit hard to break beyond that and sort of progress your career and go after those promotions, particularly in a timely way. So a lot of people will find that once they're in that comfort zone, they will very much stay in that zone until it becomes an uncomfortable zone. Okay, So you guys will have seen from the promo material, there are these sort of 4 pillars, I guess, or 4 aspects that I'm going to talk about that I think are key sort of factors on the path to getting the promotion. Number 1 is your ability to leverage your current role. Number 2 is your ability to build key relationships. Number 3, how well you can enhance your professional brand. And 4, how confident you feel or how well you're able to master the art of self-advocacy. Okay, so although I run my own business now, I worked in the corporate world for a really long time, all through my 20s and for the most part of my 30s. Towards the sort of later end of my 30s, I established a small circle. And for a good few years while I was starting a family, it was a side business or a sort of a hobby business while I was raising a family and still working within corporate. But if there's something that I know well, it's how to get ahead and how to get those promotions. It was something that I was really successful at doing throughout the course of my corporate career. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that I guess were tried and tested for me, and some of the things that I work with my clients on who work with me in my coaching programs. And these are some of the ways in which they're able to get ahead in terms of elevating their career and getting that sort of next level role in their career. But all over the place today. I've got a trip to London happening tomorrow that I'm not very planned for, and it was a bit last minute. So bear with me. Right, leveraging your current role. Often people won't really know where they can go to from their current role. Okay, so it's really important that regardless of the organization you're in and regardless of what your role is, you don't necessarily need to have all of the answers. But it's a good idea to know within your organization, like, where could you go to from here? What is the obvious next step? And what are some sort of sideways moves or some ways in which you could diversify within your current organization? So I often say to clients, get crystal clear on where you'd like to go next and use your current role as an opportunity to fill any gaps, skills boost, and get exposure to anything that you would need to show that you can deliver on in the next role. And look, you don't necessarily need to get crystal clear. Not everyone has this really sort of concrete sense of, this is the next move and the one after and the one after that. But you at least want to have some sense of where you're going to and where you're going to grow into and what your options are. Much better to get that clarity ahead of time and start to get a sense of, if I'm here at point A and I want to get to point B, how strong a contender would I be where I am now if I was going for that next level role, right? And what are some gaps or areas where I might need to do some work? And once you've got a sense of, what are my sort of, the areas where I need to brush up or any additional training that I need to do, you really want to be getting onto that well ahead of time and not trying to address any of those gaps or sort of rushing out to do professional development at the time at which you want the job. Okay, so this is very much about getting a sense within your current organization and even thinking outside of your organization. Where might I like to go in 12 months, 18 months, 24 months? What does that position description look like? What are the job titles? If I was to apply for them tomorrow, how strong a candidate would I be? What are some of those dot points maybe on the position description where I really wouldn't be able to kind of, offer anything at the table? I really don't have any concrete examples, or I just don't have that qualification. And what are some of the things that I can do now well ahead of time so that when the time does come, I'm in the strongest position that I can be? From an internal perspective, performance reviews. So often, a lot of organizations, performance reviews are an annual event. A great manager will have those continuous conversations, and it will very much be sort of a two-way discussion about how you think you're doing and how they think you're doing throughout the year. But unfortunately, a lot of organizations, it very much is still an annual sort of tick box activity, and a lot of people come away sort of disappointed. And, often there'll even be a few sort of nasty surprises at performance review if you haven't had a conversation throughout the year. Something that I often hear from my clients, and I'll talk a little bit about it later when we get to some case studies. I've got a lot of women that I work with, and they've maybe got to a fairly senior point in their career, but they're just not progressing to that next level. Okay. And they'll say to me, look, I've just had my performance review. Like, I've had a discussion with my manager. I'm being told that I'm doing everything right. Everything's going really well. They're really pleased with me. Keep doing more of what you're doing. But I've applied for a couple of internal promotions and I'm just not getting ahead. And I'm not really getting any kind of concrete sort of steps or advice on what I can actually be doing differently. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the case studies. But if you want your performance review to be anything more than just a tick box activity, you need to prep well ahead of time and step into the meeting with clarity, at least some sense of where you want to be going to next. Like, what, do you have leadership aspirations? Is there another area of the business that you'd really like to get more involved in? Do you feel like you've started to outgrow your, your role? Are you no longer feeling challenged and like there's sort of scope for you to elevate? If you're showing up at work each day and it's sort of like you're on autopilot, you don't really feel like you're growing, you don't really feel like you're that engaged, then, you've probably already outgrown that role. And you really want to have sort of some clear idea about where you might want to go to next. Which takes me on to my next point, around being clear about your ambitions, okay? Upfront, open, honest. If your manager doesn't know that you have ambitions or where you would like to go next in your career, I'd be quite concerned about that. All managers and all leaders are going to have different priorities and different styles. I know when I worked in corporate, for me, and it makes sense, right? Because I'm a career coach and I'm really interested in helping people develop and grow professionally, and achieve those goals. So when I did work in corporate and I was leading teams, I was always very much focused on their professional development and helping them get ahead. That was what really sort of sparked my passion as a leader. I was less focused on, work quality and output, and kind of sort of hovering over people's shoulders to see what they were doing. And I was more interested in how I could help them get ahead. And I know that whenever I had new people sort of coming into a team, one of the first things that I would often chat to them about, maybe even on day one, if we went for a coffee, was to try and get a sense of where do you think you might want to be going. And I think even sometimes they sort of might have thought, oh, look, it's only day one and I've only just joined, and you're already asking me like where I might want to go next. So for me, my leadership style has always been very much about developing talent, helping people figure out what their next career move would be, and then how I could best support them in getting there. So, but that's not every manager's style. Okay. And so it's something, again, I'm going to touch upon in a case study is for some managers and for some leaders, they're not that focused on your ambitions. And then their priority is not going to be nurturing talent or developing talent. They might be more focused on output and sort of workflow and things like that. So you might need to be the person that drives that conversation with your manager at performance review and those kind of in-between discussions, so that they have some sense that you have ambitions, like that you don't necessarily want to stay in the same seat for the duration of your time with an organization. It's a fine line, okay, because you want to be engaged with your workplace and you want to be giving, you want to be present in the role that you're doing. So this isn't about having a conversation with your manager and sort of saying, oh, look, I'm bored and I've outgrown my role and I want to move on and I'm not happy. You want to be having these conversations about where you would like to potentially go within your career well ahead of time, before there's any kind of a problem. So it is a bit of a balancing act, but, all good leaders and all good managers should be invested at least to some degree in your career path and the part that they have to play in helping you get there. Just know that that doesn't come naturally to all leaders and all managers. That's not everyone's natural style. And sometimes you might be the person that has to kind of bring that conversation to the table and be upfront about your ambitions and the fact that maybe you want something more for yourself or something different. Okay. Exceptional stakeholder management. So this is obviously, well, not obviously, but this is sort of more around where you might be seeking internal promotion opportunities. Your reputation really is everything. Okay. So when it comes to your internal networks and the people who kind of know you and are potentially going to be influential, especially given that where there are opportunities for acting up or for sort of a 2IC position or secondments, they're not always advertised. Sometimes it will very much be a case of, a tap on the shoulder. Someone has been earmarked for that role. And often the people who are the executive teams or the leadership teams know who these people are. They're the people who've got really, really exceptional stakeholder management skills. So the quality of their work is fantastic. Like they do what they say they're going to do and they deliver the goods, but they're also real people. Like the leadership team know who they are. So it's not always the most senior people or sort of managers that have this sort of well-known reputation. within every organization, and they're in all sorts of different pockets, every team tends to have one or two of them, and they're the real influencers, the people. They kind of know what's happening with everyone else's kids or who's going on holiday. They know when someone's mum has been unwell or is in hospital. They really kind of take the time to understand their stakeholders' pain points and what the priorities are for them. So they go beyond just sort of doing the work that's put on their plate. They go that little bit further, and they really kind of take the time to cultivate those relationships in both a professional and a personal sense. So you've got to go that little bit further than just knowing who your stakeholders are and doing the work that's done. You've really got to make your stakeholders feel like you know them, you understand them, and that you care. And try and sort of cultivate that status as an influencer, as a trusted expert, as someone who's really credible, and who's then sort of sought after and has sort of been earmarked as potential talent when it comes to succession planning. Those are the people who get the taps on the shoulder when those exciting opportunities for promotion or for acting up are sort of going around in an organization. Take your professional growth seriously. So continuously learning, developing skills are essential, particularly in today's workplace. It's competitive. More and more people are kind of making bolder career moves. People are kind of moving more often and in shorter periods of time. There are more younger leaders. It's not that uncommon at all. You know, I work with a number of C-suite leaders, CFOs, CEOs, and there are a lot of people in those top jobs now who are in their sort of, you know, mid to late 30s even, right? So whereas maybe 15, 20 years ago, CEOs would typically be, you know, white men called John in their 50s. That's certainly not, you know, representative of leadership teams today. Yes, they are still dominated by men. We know that. Yes, you know, there are more people who are white in leadership positions. Yes, there are more people who are sort of, you know, upper to middle class, but that's certainly not a given. There are lots of, you know, movers and shakers and young, high-performing leaders these days. And they often do really focus on their professional growth and development, both in terms of their technical skills, but also in terms of their, you know, those softer skills as well. So workshops, courses, additional certifications that align with your career goals. You need to consistently enhance your skill set to position yourself as an invaluable asset to your organization. This next one is a big one, and it's something that I have certainly fallen prey to in my career in the past in corporate, and that I see often see this happening for people. It's this pitfall of acting up in extra duties, and that's all well and good and fantastic ways for you to prove your promotability and for you to have a go at doing a role to find out if it's actually what you really want and if it's a good fit for you. But if you are, you need to be remunerated and recognized accordingly, right? So your substantive role ideally is going to be backfilled, allowing you to step into this acting up position properly. Ideally, you're not trying to hold down two jobs. And ideally, you're being remunerated properly for it. So a lot of organizations are going to offer you like $50 higher duties a week or some kind of, you know, sort of extra sort of small amount that really isn't representative of what the person would be getting paid if they were doing the role, you know, properly. So if it's for a shorter period of time, you know, maybe a couple of weeks, your boss is on holiday, something like that, again, like you should be remunerated for that. It may not be quite on the same scale. You might not necessarily be getting your boss's paycheck. But where this goes on for a while, you know, I've acted in senior manager roles in the past. And for one of them, I ended up doing it for 4 or 5 months for an extra $50 a week while I was doing my substantive role, which was already a senior role, and it wasn't backfilled. And ultimately, I didn't end up getting the job, and I felt really shafted and really bitter, you know, which is a whole other story. And while I'm really happy with the fact that I didn't get that job now and everything that was meant to happen did, you know, they really did kind of get their money's worth out of me. So I was getting paid an extra $50 a week doing a role that, you know, had someone been doing that role properly, they probably would have been getting sort of like an extra 70 grand a year, maybe. And I allowed that to go on for month after month. So it was 4.5 months that I think I ended up doing that role for. That's not what you want to see happening. If you're consistently working at a high level and it's ongoing, then you want to be asking for a position reclassification, a formal pay rise, and public recognition as well. Because one of the other downsides of being in a sort of acting up role where it hasn't really been formalized, you don't really have the title, no one's really acknowledging it org wide, is you don't quite have that credibility, and it can be quite difficult to know, what kind of a mandate do you have around decision making, right? It's a little bit like you're keeping a seat warm, but you're not really doing the job, even though you are doing, the tasks and you're doing the hours. So yes, it's great having those opportunities to 2IC or act up, but really it needs to be for a finite period. It can't just be ongoing and you're not really getting the money and you don't know where you stand. So that's a little bit about leveraging your current role. Have a really good sense of where could you go within the organization, what are the obvious next steps, and what are some of the possible moves that are maybe not so obvious. Take your performance reviews seriously and try not to make them an annual occurrence. Try and have that two-way conversation with your manager all year round. Be clear about your ambitions. If you are someone who wants to get ahead, if you do want to lead a team, if you are thinking that you don't want to work in marketing anymore and you're really interested in HR, like, have those conversations and share them in an appropriate, positive way, not a whingy way, right? It's not about I hate my job. It's about I really love this organization and I'm wondering if there's an opportunity for me to get ahead or diversify, like staying within this organization. Exceptional stakeholder management, so going above and beyond in terms of those relationships, the depth of those relationships. Take your professional growth seriously, make sure each year when you're having those conversations at performance review times, or whenever you see something that you want to be doing, try and find professional development which is going to enhance your technical skill set and your ability to deliver a job really well. And then something which is going to stretch you more in terms of, leadership, communications skills, influencing skills, something that's a little bit more transferable. Okay, so we always want to be thinking about our professional growth and development, both in terms of the job that we're doing now and something that could serve us in a broader way, or in a more transferable way. Take the opportunities to step up, but within reason. Okay, don't let people take advantage of you. Sometimes you have to boomerang. So sometimes, for whatever reason, you may really be valued in an organization. People may really like you, but for whatever reason, and this is going to come up a little bit in the case studies, you're just not going to get any further at this point in time. And you might love the organization and you might feel that your work there isn't done, but sometimes you've got a boomerang, which means you leave, you go elsewhere, you take that next step, and then maybe you come back. Okay, but sometimes you've got to leave in order to get ahead in your organization. Like, you're just not going to get ahead at this point in time. Build key relationships. Managers, mentors, mates. So if you follow me on social media, or if you've been to any of my webinars before, either with WORK180 or the ones that I've done myself, you'll know that I feel very fortunate in terms of, throughout the course of my corporate career, I've, for the most part, had fantastic managers. They've backed me, they've believed in me, they've sort of, it's been really clear even at the interview point that they felt that I was the right person for the job. I haven't sort of experienced, bullying or managers undermining me. Like, they very much backed me and performed that kind of mentor role as well. And even then, now it's been, I don't know, probably like 5 years since I worked in corporate, 4 or 5 years since I worked in corporate. I'm still in contact with most of my managers. They're still my mentors. And now some of them are even my mates. They're very much invested in my business. They've backed me. And I feel a little bit like I've picked the number 3. It's always worked for me. For some people, you might just have one really trusted mentor. I know some people have more mentors than that, but I feel a little bit like 3 has always been a good number for me. So ideally, it's the person who's doing your immediate next job, your immediate ideal next job. So whether that's a case of you want to ultimately step up into your manager's role one day, or maybe it's a different role, a role elsewhere, it's not your manager's. And someone who's 5 years ahead and someone who's 10 years ahead. And it's not necessarily that you want their job and that you see yourself doing their job in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. It may even be, someone who is a leader and they're 10 years older than you. They've just got that more life experience and more work experience by virtue of that, sort of the age difference. So sometimes it's going to be around, this is the person who's doing my ideal next job, whether it's your next role or 5 years or 10 years, Or it might be, here is someone whose leadership style I really, really value. Like I really kind of would like to be able to emulate what it is they bring to the table. It might be someone who's got fantastic negotiation and influencing skills. It might be someone who's just a brilliant public speaker and presenter, and they're able to hold space and engage people. And you think, look, I would really love to be able to learn from them. So you're going to want potentially different things from different mentors. They're not all going to serve the same purpose. But generally speaking, I feel like 3 is a good number. 1's a little bit limited. Any more than 3, and it's really hard to kind of have that relationship in a meaningful way and actually have those kind of, actually kind of stay in contact over the years, because really good mentors are going to stay with you for a bit of a chapter. Like hopefully they're going to be in your life for a little while, not necessarily a season, but a little bit longer than that, even beyond your current workplace. Beyond mentors and managers, and who may or may not become mates, look to people who you respect, who you admire, and who kind of encapsulate what you think is a great leader, what you think is a great communicator. And it can be really helpful to ask yourself, like, how have these people got to where they are? There's a lot to be said for surrounding yourself with people who've got themselves to a place where you would like to be. These are the people whose advice, opinion, and insight you would do well to seek out. Something that often comes up when I'm working with clients, it's more of a thing for women than men, but I do know from speaking to some of the male clients that I occasionally work with, and just within my social circle, we all fall prey to comparisonitis, right? It's natural to look to other people, particularly people who have, we think are doing really well, or are particularly skilled at something, or maybe a few steps ahead of us in our career. That's normal, but what we want to do to make it productive is ask ourselves, like, how have they got there? Like, what is it about them that makes them really good at public speaking? And how can I kind of benefit or glean from that? We don't want to be looking at people who've got further ahead than us, or we think are better than us in, a particular skill or what have you, and for it to make us feel bad about ourselves. It's much more productive to kind of ask, like, well, how have they got there? Is there anything they've done that I can kind of replicate? And it's not about copying them, or trying to be someone that you're not. But I often say this to clients: if they're thinking of a bit of a career change or a pivot, or it's, an unusual role that you maybe don't see in too many organizations, I will say, well, go away and have a look on LinkedIn. Let's find some people who are doing the job, like chief happiness officer or chief customer experience officer, and let's trace back. Let's just have a look and see, like, how did they get where they got to? Like, literally, let's retrace their steps. Is it going to be as hard for you to get there as you think it is? Because if someone else has got there, then that means someone else can too. So I think managers, mentors, maybe they become mates. Ideally, you've got about 3 in different kind of stages. So your immediate next job, and then maybe someone who's 5 years and 10 years older and wiser than you, and getting a sense of who are some people that you know, who are some people within your kind of circles that have got themselves to a place that you really admire, or have a particular skill that you wish you could have more of yourself, and then asking yourself, how did they do that? Get your name known internally and externally for the right reasons. So building key relationships. If you're, and this is a little bit ties back to that exceptional stakeholder management. A lot of roles, they're not always going to be advertised. Sometimes it very much is a tap on the shoulder, or even where something is advertised, often people will have sort of a preferred candidate or an idea in mind of who might be a good fit. So you want to get your name known for the right reasons, and that is because you're a trusted expert, you're someone with integrity, you do what you say you're going to do, when you say you're going to do it, you treat people really well, you've got sort of transferable skills, you're someone who will sort of go above and beyond. And again, I'm going to come on to this. You go above and beyond, and you're kind of involved in different pockets of the organization beyond your role, but for the right reasons, right? So it's because you're a strategic thinker, or it's because you really care about the organization's culture. It's not because you're getting stuck in the weeds and you're doing all the busy work and you're arranging lunches and you're running around with someone's goodbye card, right? We want to really think about our brand and our reputation. And, when people think of us, what is it they're thinking of us? Really get to know your customers. And again, that's building that kind of next layer of a relationship. So hopefully we've all had experience of some really good CEOs and really good leaders, and they know more about us than just who we are in our job title. They know that we're about to go back to London, to see our family, and that it's been a really long time. They know that we're doing yoga teacher training at the weekend, and they're wanting to know, like, well, when are you doing your exams, and like, did you pass? Right. So we really want to know our customers. It doesn't mean you have to be friends with everyone or sort of invade their private life, but ideally, you've got a sense of what is, from a professional sense, what are the goals that they've got for their kind of teams that they're leading? What are their pain points? What are the problems that they have that you can solve? If they're going to be coming to you for advice or for a piece of work, like, how does your team and your function fit in with theirs? And you know a little bit about them personally. Like, you at least know, are they about to have a baby? Do they have kids? You've got some kind of knowledge there. Maybe you can build a rapport. Maybe you both like the same kind of music or the same kind of film. It really is relationships that are one of the things, particularly internally, that are going to help you get ahead. And show your network some love. So a lot of people will build their networks. They've got all these contacts on LinkedIn, but they hardly ever sort of reach out or sort of have any conversations. And so when the time comes, and they sort of, you might want a favor, or you see a role that's come up in an organization, and you're thinking, well, I haven't spoken to this person for 10 years, or the last time I saw them was 5 years ago. It can feel really icky to then feel like you're calling in a favor. So if you've got a network, if you're someone who's got, former colleagues that you're connected with on LinkedIn, pop in and say hi for no reason other than to say hi. Like, it's been a while and we haven't connected. I'm wondering how you are. And then when the time comes, if you do feel like you have a favor that you might want to ask, or you're expressing interest in a role at an organization, it doesn't feel quite so icky to kind of say, hey, look, it's me. Enhancing your professional brand. So your reputation internally will be one of the biggest contributory factors in terms of how well you progress up the ladder. The reality is influencers get ahead. I said that a little while ago earlier on. And when you are aiming for that promotion, consider expanding your influence beyond your immediate role. So, if there are cross-functional projects happening, culture pieces, opportunities to collaborate across departments, be someone who puts your hand up for those things where they're going to serve you. Becoming a respected go-to person for diverse initiatives will not only showcase your versatility, but it will also put you on the radar of decision makers. And your willingness to go to contribute beyond your job description can often be a key factor in landing that promotion. Confidence. If you don't believe in you, why would they? And again, when I get to the case study section in a minute, there's a really important thing to keep in mind here. So I often hear from clients who sort of get stuck in this imposter syndrome loop. And the unfortunate thing is, the less they believe in themselves, the less anyone else does. And then the less anyone else does, the less they do. And so it goes on and on and on. And so I always say to clients, if you don't believe in you, why would they? If you don't believe in you and your expertise, and you don't believe that you've got the answers, or you might have some good ideas, why would you have a seat at the table? If you were wobbling like a plate of jelly, I wouldn't have you at my table if I was a leader. Ultimately, the people who get ahead are going to be the people who can communicate these qualities. These are the people who make employers go, wow. They're the people who score promotions and big pay rises. And they're not the hard workers. They're not the people who are necessarily the hardest workers, or the busiest, or the most loyal, okay? They're the people with untapped potential, people who can show really strong alignment with company values and culture, people who can demonstrate really deep self-awareness, reflective practice. They're open to feedback. They don't mind constructive criticism. It's not going to make them, burst into tears. And they understand the value of their unique strengths. So they're really insightful. They know what they bring to the table. They believe in themselves. They've got natural leadership abilities. I don't necessarily believe that people are either leaders or not. I think, there are some people who are not natural leaders, but who might have leadership aspirations, and with coaching and mentoring can absolutely become leaders. But there is also sort of a pocket of people, or sort of a section of people within the workforce, who are just natural leaders. And they're often the people who kind of even natural leaders in the playground, like as kids. They're very much, the class rep, and they're the ones who are kind of looking out for other kids within the class who maybe don't have those early leadership abilities. A sense of purpose and what drives them. Okay, so really driven, they know why they're getting out of bed in the morning. There's an alignment between, or there's sort of, they're very much aligned with the organization and its mission. They feel like they're purposeful, they're working for a cause they believe in. And ultimately, and this is a really hard one, it's people who have great personalities and are likable. It is the popular, likable people who will often get ahead. Not always. Like, there are some rotten CEOs out there who have poor people skills, maybe they're bullies or they harass staff. So it's not always wonderful, likable people who are in the top jobs, but often your personality is what is going to help you get ahead. Wow, 12:35 already. I have a lot to say on this topic. Enhancing your professional brand. Oh, sorry, hold on. Here we go. Level up your lingo and take up space, and then go to girls and hamsters. So level up your lingo. And this is something I've talked to a client about this morning. And hopefully you might just even find this a bit of a practical tip. So a lot of the women I work with don't always feel respected. They don't always feel that they're sort of taken seriously or that they're credible. And just making some subtle shifts in your language and how you kind of present your opinions can be really helpful here. So I've noticed, particularly when I'm doing interview coaching, my clients will often say things like, well, I think, or I feel, or maybe we could. And you can very easily just level up your lingo by saying things along the lines of, my advice is X, or based on my experience and projects that I've delivered in the past, I would recommend. So being a little bit more assertive with your language, saying things like, my advice is, my recommendation is, based on my experience, or two options are A and B. So being a lot more decisive and trying to steer away from some of that I think, I feel, or maybe. Taking up space as well. So we don't really, you'll see this more with men in the workplace. They'll often kind of be like taking up space. We don't want to be like having our legs spread and putting our arms everywhere, but we do want to kind of be able to open up our bodies and take up space a little bit. So if you're someone who sits at the meeting table and you're curled inwards and you're sort of hunched and you're fidgeting and you're tapping your pen and you're playing with your hair and you're making yourself small, you don't look confident. So it's about finding, how do I take up space? How do I hold myself, even if I'm standing, if I'm presenting? If you're someone who talks with your hands a lot, like I do, is it confident, engaging gestures rather than the kind of nervous fidgets? So I'll often give clients that feedback. I will have worked with them on a number of sessions, and so I know what they do. Like, I know how they will often present. Just finishing off this section talking about go-to girls and hamsters. And this is about that kind of busyness, being busy, but stuck in the weeds, right? Doing all of the really kind of transactional work and not really being involved in that kind of big picture work, the strategic work. You want to be involved in putting your hands up to go above and beyond, but for the right reasons. So if there's like a change project happening, or there's a staff working group that's being put together to bring in new well-being initiatives, that's the kind of stuff that we want to put our hands up. We don't want to be the go-to girl who's just running out to get someone's lunch or picking up dry cleaning or anything like that. And the same goes for hamsters, okay? Hard workers don't get ahead. They really don't. Smart workers do. If you're the person who always looks like you can barely breathe and you're running around and you're busy, and you're sitting at your desk late, you don't necessarily look like a high performer. You look like maybe you're struggling to kind of keep a grip on your workload. You look like maybe you're inefficient. So you want to get the balance right between someone who's adding extra value, going above and beyond, but you're not a go-to girl and you're not a hamster. You're not scurrying around looking like you're not coping with work. Master the art of self-advocacy. This one is so hard for a lot of people, more so women than men, but not all men are superior self-advocates. You want to make sure you really embrace your achievements, particularly on your CV and at interview. So when I'm writing CVs for clients, they're very much achievement and skills and strengths based. They're not really focused on, these are the tasks that I do. You want your CV to be a showcase of your achievements and how you left an organization better than you found it, right? What are the ways that you improved things? How did you make this workplace a better place for staff and for customers? You don't really want it to look like your position description. And again, embracing your achievements at interview. One of the most common pieces of feedback that people get, particularly women, will be at interview, falling into the trap of we statements. So, well, we did this and we did that. and finding it very hard to say I, like this, you know, I achieved this. This is what I did. And this is really challenging, particularly in internal interviews. It can be more of a struggle to own those achievements because a lot of workplaces focus so much on the team and sort of collaborative efforts and celebrating like shared success that it can then actually become really difficult for an individual to kind of own those achievements. And I find that that can be much harder internally than externally. When you go to an external interview, you know, for a new job or for a promotion, it can be a little bit easier to kind of, you know, claim that glory. Internally, it can be a real challenge. And that's something that I often work with my clients on when we're coaching for interview. Beware the selection criteria, confidence zapper. It's all too easy to, you know, have a look at a selection criteria or those dot points and just feel like, well, like we don't fit the bill, we don't tick them all. So women are really conservative when it comes to this. Most women will wait until they meet either all or at least 90% of those criteria. Men will have a crack at around 50 to 60. The reality is this. Okay, if you already tick all of the boxes, if you're looking at a position description or an advert and you think I could do all of that with my eyes closed, you've already outgrown that role before you've even got it. Okay, if you haven't already done something or it hasn't been a key part of your role, think about how you'd go about it, and then you can at least talk about what your approach would be if it comes up at interview. You don't need to have done every single thing in a job ad or a position description to be a great candidate for the role. You're looking for that sweet spot between being able to hit the ground running and adding instant value if you get the role, and having enough room that you can still grow and stay, right? So an employer wants to know that if you come into this job, you're going to be able to add value, you'll be able to get on with it, but you're still going to be happy enough and challenged enough that they're not going to have to be filling that role again in sort of like 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. All right, elevate your interview answers. This has come up so much for me in the last few days because I've done about 5 or 6 interview coaching sessions on Friday and Monday. Probably about 60% of interview questions will be the same regardless of the job you're going for, okay? About 40% will be tailored to the specific role. And something I often hear from clients when I'll say to them, like, what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? They will say to me, oh, that's easy. I always say this. I always say that I find it difficult to delegate, or I always find it difficult to, you know, switch off. You need to elevate your interview answers, okay? If you're going for a promotion or the role that you're going for today at interview is likely to be more senior than the role that you were going for 3 years ago or 5 years ago, the answers that you gave back then are not going to be the best answers that you can give today. They can't be, because you're going for a more senior role. So you need to be giving a more elevated answer. All right. So interview prep, really important. And a lot of those answers you can really think about ahead of time. You can nail your pitch. And the other thing that I like to work with my clients on when it comes to interviews is layering. So giving that extra value add. So so for example, here you go. So I coached someone last night, a teacher, senior teacher going for a vice principal role. And a question that they told me often came up at interview was, what do you do to safeguard your well-being, and how do you kind of protect your work-life balance? And they gave me their answer, and they said, look, these are my hobbies and the things I'd like to talk about. And I said, well, great. Those are all really good. But you want to elevate your interview answer and give them even more. So once you've told them what your approach is to make sure that you've got your leisure time and what sorts of things you enjoy doing in your spare time, given that you're now going for a really senior leadership role, give them more. Tell them then what your approach is to making sure that your staff and the people you lead are maintaining a work-life balance, and how do you sort of talk to your teams about the importance of that, okay? So elevate the interview answers, always give them more goodies than they're asking for. We're going to go through a couple of case studies now just quickly because I'm conscious of time. So Caroline's story, she was very much stuck in a box. She had been at a big four bank for a really, really long time, something like maybe 12 to 14 years. And again, she was in a leadership role. There was nothing wrong. Every performance review was fine and dandy. There was no feedback. There was no kind of area of like, this is where you could be doing better. But she was ready for something more. She'd done her role for a really long time. Her manager was very much focused on sort of output and, the quality of work, and less on, developing talent and what the people in his team's career plans may be. Something that was really interesting here was there was a more junior person, a man in this team in his 30s, so sort of a good 10 to 15 years younger than Caroline. And he was getting so much airtime from Caroline's manager. He was someone who was a mover and a shaker. He was really upfront about his ambitions. He sort of knew who was who in the zoo. People knew him. And so Caroline was struggling to get this airtime and investment from her manager. But this guy within her team was having, coffees, and he was getting mentored, and poor old Caroline sort of didn't really know what to do about that. The reality was she was stuck in a box. She was really good at what she did. Because she was a mum, it was sort of like, I think at the back of people's minds, it was like, well, she's doing really well there and that's working for her as a mum. And she'd never really articulated that she was ambitious and that she wanted something more or different or better for herself. And so the investment wasn't there. Whereas there was this sort of young gun in the team, this guy in his 30s, who would probably be a great fit for Caroline's job now that she's moved on. And he was getting all the airtime because he would insist on having those coffees and getting that exposure to the leadership team. So I think probably, the motherhood trap was at play here a little bit. People made an assumption that, Caroline was doing well and her job was family friendly and it was good enough for now. And she was also a little bit reluctant to kind of express some of those ambitions, as lots of women are when they're mums, because it's like, well, what if I take on that extra responsibility and I'm leading more people or my job's more important, and then I'm getting those phone calls saying that, the kids are at daycare and they're sick, or it's school holidays. So often, a lot of women will kind of cap themselves at a certain point because they feel like that next level is just out of bounds or out of reach for them because they're a mother, and it's a little bit of a trap that you then get stuck in. Sarah's story. So this goes back to the spiral of doubt that I talked about before. So she works in the public sector and she has a very strong counterpart who's maybe 15 years younger than her and male. So there's the two of them, two senior members in the team. And for some reason, he's always more sought out than her when it comes to things like, opinion or advice or what would you do? Again, like there's nothing wrong. She's great. People like her. It's not about no one wants her there. But there's this counterpart. And for some reason, they're the person who kind of, their opinion is maybe more sought out. Or if someone needed to act up, they would be a stronger contender for that. And there's this spiral of doubt. So the more that someone doubts themselves, the less credible they feel, the less anyone's going to really kind of value your opinion or think that you're the credible expert. And so the less they seek you out and the more that you see they don't really believe in you, the less confident you feel. And so it's this spiral of doubt that goes round and round and round. A lot of people, again, particularly women, will kind of get stuck at this point where they're really good at, sort of more of a team leader role. They're leading people, but it's very much focused on kind of output, local leadership at a local level. They don't really have a seat at the table. They're not really seen as a strategic leader. And so that's something that I often work with my clients on if they're wanting to kind of elevate from that middle management into a more senior leadership role. You really do need to kind of shift your thinking, how you position yourself and who you network with. So there's a really big difference between that team leader, operational kind of leadership and moving into the more strategic thought leadership space. And we've got the overstayers. So I've known Erin for a long time. I've worked with her a couple of times as she's kind of gone for promotions. Quite strong in the not-for-profit sector, a long pattern of overstaying. And it'll be really interesting. It's really interesting because when I've sort of spoken to her, she would always have a very fixed view. Well, I'll stay in this role for at least 3 to 5 years. And it's always quite a long period. And so that's fine. I don't think people necessarily need to make a decision from the outset about, I'm only going to stay for this long. But I do caution people to kind of not have these fixed ideas about how long they're going to stay in a job. Always be open to the next amazing thing coming along when you don't expect it, or before you feel fully ready for it. So for a lot of my clients, perfectionism and imposter syndrome will be at play, and they're going to be things that are going to encourage you to stay too long in an organization or stay in a role until you've outgrown it. Erin is very similar to a lot of the women that I work with in that she would want to be able to be sure that she met all of those criteria, had really meaty, concrete examples for all of them. And, taking that next move would always feel, quite scary and like a big decision. So when I started working with Erin, when we first connected on coaching, she was a senior organizational development consultant, and she wanted to go for a new role as an L&D manager at an organization. She had already outgrown that role at the time that I coached her, and we went for the role and she got it. Okay. She then had the opportunity to go for a promotion internally as head of L&D. And she could have already done that role at the first point at which we connected. Okay. So what I'm saying is she, in my opinion, was brilliant enough and skilled enough and experienced enough that she could have completely bypassed that L&D manager level. She had overstayed in her senior org development consultant role, and could definitely had, what was needed to take that head of L&D role. So when the opportunity came up, she was sort of like, oh, I've only been in the L&D role for 6 months. Like, is it too soon? I wanted to do it for at least 2 years. But she couldn't really give me any concrete reason, like behind the 2 years. I was like, well, what's going to be different? If you stay in this role for another 18 months, what's actually going to be different? And so ultimately she went for the head of L&D role. She got it. Yay. And so in the course of our kind of 12 months that we worked on kind of going through this process, she kind of got maybe an extra 50 grand and had jumped up 2 levels, which was fantastic. Okay. Job hunters, you are the product. So this is a hard pill, a bitter pill to swallow, because it pushes us out of our comfort zone, right? If we know this is true, this is going to push us out of our comfort zone, but it's not always, or even usually, the best candidate that's going to get the job or the promotion. It's the best job hunter. You can be the most qualified, experienced candidate and not stand a hope in hell of getting the job. Getting the job is often going to be about how good you are at marketing and sales, okay? And you are the product that you're marketing and selling. So more often than not, the job is going to go to the person who can articulate their value on the spot with absolute conviction. You believe in you back yourself, and you're able to articulate it. Literally that elevator pitch, okay? You're okay with having a conversation with the CEO in the lift. It's not going to make you feel awkward. You're not going to go red. It feels natural to you, right? You've worked towards that level of confidence. You demonstrate strong fit for the team and a personality that the hiring manager is going to enjoy leading. You come across as high potential, the type of candidate who's in demand and is going places, okay? And you show how keen you are to get the job at all stages of the hiring process. The good news is you can be that job hunter too. So a quick recap, and if you're on my last webinar, you will have seen this before. Be upfront about your interests, your aspirations, your career goals, the fact that you are ambitious, that you want to go ahead. Find any opportunities within your existing workplace. Know what your potential promotion pathway is. If there's any opportunities to act up, take on higher duties in a way that feels good, so you're being paid for it, you're being acknowledged for it, take those opportunities. Courses, professional development opportunities, your network, build those relationships, find those managers and those mentors who could then go on to be mates and support you through the course of your, your career journey. Invest in a professionally written CV. Do the interview coaching so that you're able to give those standout answers, the ones that are really going to take you to the next level, because the CV and the interview answers that you used a few years ago are not going to get you that promotion. It doesn't make sense that they would. If you're going up here, then we don't want to be if you're kind of moving forwards, you don't want to be using answers that you gave back then. Invest in an experienced coach. I would love anyone who's thinking about going for a promotion or has perhaps been having a try and not getting there, grab a Career Crossroads mini coaching call with me. You can connect with me on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I've popped a link to my website there, smallcircle.com.au. I've taken up far more time than I intended to. I absolutely love what I do, so it doesn't feel like work for me, and I very easily talk for longer than I plan to. I might hand back over to Jenna, if you're still there, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hannah. That was awesome. Leveling up your lingo, definitely something that I resonate with. Got to remember that. Okay, so we have 2 questions. Maybe we'll try to get through them in the last 7 minutes. So from Mary, what is the advice for those who identify as neurodiverse, especially in relation to what was mentioned regarding body language, presenting confidently, for example, not fidgeting?
Yeah, okay. So I've worked with a number of clients, to kind of coach them through some strategies. And it's not even just clients who identify as neurodivergent, but even clients who perhaps are, suffer from anxiety, and just kind of can be quite sort of restless or even have a panic attack during an interview. These are all things that I coach clients on. I actually recommend, depending on the workplace. So again, when I'm working with clients, we think really carefully about like what's the job and what's the workplace, who are some of the people on the panel. I actually really encourage clients to kind of own anything that is coming to the table with them that's part of their personality, it's part of who they are, it's part of who's going to be showing up every day if you're the successful candidate in the role. And to have conversations from the outset about, you know, anything that kind of makes you uniquely who you are and how you show up. So because you want to find a workplace where you're going to feel really comfortable and really confident in showing up as who you are. So if you are someone who, you know, maybe body language or the way you kind of sort of hold space is going to be an issue for you, challenging for you, not necessarily an issue, or just different for you, you know, whatever that looks like, work with someone who's able to kind of really spend the time understanding like what is it about you and how are you going to show up and what are some individual strategies that are going to support you. But really encourage you to find the right workplace, find a leader that's going to enable you to be confident and comfortable as you are, as you come to the table. So being open and upfront about who you are in your entirety. So bringing your whole self to interview. And if that means having any conversations. So so where I have clients, for example, with anxiety, I actually encourage them to have that conversation with someone on the panel ahead of time. If it's likely to emerge as an issue, you know, I've got a client who has had to exit interviews because anxiety and public speaking is really overwhelming. Now, ultimately, you need to find coping strategies because being able to publicly speak, you know, and perhaps the role you're going for, you're going to have to be able to hold space and speak in a meeting. So you want to work on finding those strategies where you can cope and show up as your best self. But I think with things like an interview, it's okay to have those conversations ahead of time and say, look, you know, this isn't the most comfortable. No one likes interviews. So I think, you know, give yourself grace for that. A lot of people are going to be coming across as sort of nervous or fidgeting or however it manifests. But I would encourage potentially, depending on the organization and the role, I would support clients in sort of having that conversation offline. And if there are particular triggers, you know, if there's anything that's going to maybe make the experience more comfortable for you, seeing if that can be facilitated. A really great workplace is going to try and make you feel comfortable. So I think, you know, it really depends on you and what you kind of need to feel more confident and comfortable. But we kind of work on individual strategies and maybe even have a conversation ahead of time.
Right. Thank you. Okay, so let's try fit in one more. I'm going for my first interview tomorrow in many years, yay, for a senior finance manager role. Do you have some examples of curly questions I may receive in the interview?
Curly questions?
Yes.
Look, I think people shouldn't be asking curly questions. So that'd be the first thing. So anyone who pulls any wacky questions out of the bag, and I've heard some clangers in my time, you know, if you were a piece of fruit in a bowl, what would you be and why? Like, why does anyone need to even ask you that? Some of the questions that they're not necessarily curly questions, but they're questions where people could do a lot better than they do, particularly around like, you know, what's your greatest weakness, for example? Or if I was to ask, you know, if I was to ask people and you weren't in a room, what would they say about you? Or what would your manager say you needed to improve? We always want to look for opportunities when we're giving our interview answers to address the question, but tell our own story. Okay. So I always coach clients, prime example, like what's your greatest weakness? I would not even have my clients use the word weakness in an answer, right? So what's your greatest weakness? I would say something I'm really proud of, which I've improved over the last 12 months and has become a strength of mine, is my ability to, you know, contribute my thoughts and ideas in meetings where it relates to something outside my area of expertise. In the past, I didn't necessarily feel confident speaking about an area which wasn't part of my job, but I've done a lot of professional development and growth on that in the last 12 months. And it's something I'm really proud of. So I just wouldn't even go on anything curly or negative. I would tell my own story. If someone said to you, if a question was, you know, what would someone say about you if you weren't in the room? And if you're going through negativity at work, or you've got a manager who hates you, or you're feeling like, you know, you don't gel with your team, these are the kinds of questions that can derail you. Again, you know, tell your own story. So an answer to that question would be something I would hope anyone would say about me, regardless of whether it was personally or professionally, would be that I have integrity, I'm a team player, and I have high standards. You know, those are reflective of my values. And I'd really hope that anyone you asked would say those things about me. So again, we're not even going to worry about what Mary in HR would say about you. Tell your own story. I've got a sort of a little bit of an interview guide that I pulled together a while ago for an interview masterclass. We should do an interview masterclass, Jenna. I've done one before.
Let's do it.
If anyone wants a copy or to have a little bit of a chat about interview questions and how you can kind of plan ahead for interview questions that can sometimes trip you up, feel free to send me a message. I'm more than happy to chat offline, but we've just hit 12:59. Curly questions. You know, if someone said to me, like, what would you be if you're a bowl of fruit and why? I'd just say, look, that's a really interesting question. No one's ever asked me. Let me think about that while you tell me what piece of fruit you'd be. I mean, like, why are they asking you curly questions? It's not indicative of a great workplace. If they're trying to trip you up, I would just turn that question back on them, see how they handle it, and then kind of give an answer that reflected that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that is great advice and a good one to leave on. We will be sending out the recording, any links and everything like that, as well as Hannah's contacts. You're very welcome to hang around in the forum, ask any questions, meet some new people and network. But otherwise, I'm going to end the stream unless Hannah has anything else to say.
No, just thanks again so much to everyone who joined. Thanks, Jenna, for having me. It's always a pleasure. And I'm really happy to chat to anyone offline. As I said, I offer free mini coaching calls, 30-minute calls. Genuinely, they are coaching calls. It's not a sales call. So if often clients do end up working with me, but there's no obligation, in any sense there. So connect with me on socials, book a call, and I'd love to chat with you more if you're planning a promotion or you're hoping to get ahead.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you
Jenna.
next time. Bye.